Good morning and welcome. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, aka Coach Trippy. I'm with Sheena Meade, the CEO of, and let me just get this correct, the Clean Slate Initiative. The Clean Slate Initiative is huge. And she tells this incredible story. Dr. Sheena Meade tells this incredible story on TED Talks about how a simple mistake can turn your whole life, your entire life, upside down. And I think the simple mistake Dr. Sheena Meade made was she wrote a check for $87.26 and it didn't clear. And it became a situation where the police came knocking on her door. And one of the things, because she says the prosecutor has the option of prosecuting or not prosecuting. He chose to prosecute. We're not going to think out loud as to why. We're just going to say he had the choice and he made the conscious decision to prosecute. And Dr. Sheena Meade was taken from her home in front of her kids in handcuffs. And ultimately, not only is that the most discouraging experience in life, or can be very well one of the most discouraging experiences in life, it messed her up for years to come. And she created the Clean Slate Initiative, which basically means if you make a simple mistake, sooner or later you can clean that slate. You can clean that mistake. But if you don't take that off your record, it impedes you from all sorts of things. Renting an apartment, buying a car, getting a job. So Dr. Sheena Meade, please tell us your story. And you've actually had
Well, you
success
told
in
the
six
story.
states
Good morning, Coach Trippy.
I
Oh, no. Coach Trippy, you got to catch up. It is 14 states and DC. And it was just 2 weeks ago that the Missouri governor signed Clean Slate into law in Missouri. We've been able to pass Clean Slate in 14 states and DC, creating a pathway for 18 million people to get their records sealed.
Now let's talk about in some states, it literally clears itself. Is that correct? But in some states, you've got to go through a lot of legal jargon and expense. Is that correct? Or
Well, so before Clean Slate, before you have, the Clean Slate legislation is passed, just about all 50 states have laws on the books that says that once a person has remained crime free for certain offenses, that they're eligible to get their records sealed after waiting a certain time period or whatsoever. But every state is different. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Some states, it is very bureaucratic. It could be costly. It could be very confusing on how to even start the process. And so that is why the Clean Slate legislation that we're passing is really being able to help scale and streamline the process that the burden is no longer on the person. The person don't have to initiate it. They've been crime free. They've earned their clean slate. And so that automatically comes off their record. I will let you know there are 30 million people today that are eligible to get the record clear. But less than 10% of the people do it because of all the bureaucracy we just talked about and all the confusion.
and that's something else you're working on is just getting that automatic slate cleaned, right? You just reached that
Yep.
time. You're crime free for 5 years. You've reached that pinnacle. And now you don't have to go through that anymore. It's a great initiative. And like you said, you're at 14 states. You've got 36 states to go. So you've got a long ways to go. But how long has it taken? And you're at it all the time. Just like we just talked, you're in Chicago just yesterday. You're back home today.
Yes.
You're at it all
Yes.
the time.
Yeah.
And that's so
Yeah.
go ahead.
You was gonna say how long did it take to get here?
Yeah, how long did it take to get to 14 states? Now I know you said it's been 20 years since your first incident.
Yeah. It took only 6 years. That's the thing, because I think people know, whether they're on the left or the right, that this is a common sense policy. So this took 6 years, and that's not a long time for legislation to pass and actually states to start implementing it. So I've been at this for 6 years. And the goal for us is that in the next 5 years, that we will have passed clean slate in half the country. I'm particularly looking at the South, where we live at, Coach Trippy, where it's harder to pass laws and legislations, and not just because of political appetite or climate, but because of the feasibility, technical feasibility, infrastructure modernization, to make sure that we could do the automation. So my goal is to start working in the South. So hopefully in the next 5 years, I'll be able to come back and tell you that I too got my slate clean, because I don't have a clean slate right now.
You know what I find interesting, especially when you say the South, I find Florida interesting. Everything's a constitutional amendment in Florida. And I would like it to be placed on the ballot. But then I realized in order to get it placed on the ballot, it can cost as much as $12 million to get to that point, to get to those signatures, to get to that point where we can get that. Because Florida is one of the, like you said, it's just slow. Like you've done 15 states. Was it 15?
I was figured into existence, Trippy, but 14 states, yes.
14 states in 6 years. So you can get, you want to get to half the country in another 5 years. That's 25 states. You can do it. But Florida is going to be the biggest challenge of all, I feel like.
I don't think Florida be the biggest challenge. Since you're talking about constitutional amendments, that you're inviting me to do a little brag that in 2018, that along with my husband, we was able to pass Amendment 4 that restored voting rights to 1.4 million people with felony convictions as a constitutional amendment. And we know that is the power of people who believe in second chances and redemption. And so I think we are in a place in the world where people, again, do believe in redemption, second chances, and that if people earned their right and they paid their debts, as people like to say, they should be able to move on with life. But, constitutional amendments are expensive. And it's a little harder now since 2018 to pass a constitutional amendment in Florida. But I believe that we could do this with legislation. I believe that there are legislators that believe in this issue now, and so not only Florida but all the southern states. And so there folks have made progress. Folks have been doing work with around expungements for years in the states, but now we're just bringing a solution where they could scale and automate it. And it's an opportunity to get people back to work.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing is if you clear people, especially in Florida, we're shorthanded all over the place, and all the theme parks and all the restaurants, just clear people's slate and enable them to get good jobs. Because like I said, I was working for a local chain, and a lot of the kids were working for us at simply less wages because they couldn't get a job in a theme park where the notion of a felony conviction was a problem, whereas we didn't look at it being a local
Okay.
restaurant. So why
No.
not? Why not just, and I mean, I loved all the kids I worked with. My goal in life was always to be a kindergarten teacher. And I feel like working in the
Yeah.
restaurant business as a manager, working with young people was really
Yeah.
ultimately what it was meant to be for me.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that if you clear, and I was actually at one point campaigning for office, and I met a guy that was really excited about getting his voting rights back. And I had no idea that was your
Ah,
initiative. And he was right here
yeah.
in Groveland. I'm in Claremont. I was walking the streets of Groveland. And you can't imagine being sort of semi-liberal in this Lake County area. But he really received me well. And I said, this is one of the greatest movements we've seen in Florida in the longest time. Is that we're going to
Yeah.
get you back your voting rights. And he got them back. He's like, I'm voting for you. I
Yes.
never got on the ballot, but I was
Yeah.
glad to meet
Well,
him.
yeah. Well, congratulations for taking that step, running. And I know there were so many people, and I mean, that was a year where people came together like around a common issue, a common value of second chances. And it was really beautiful. And I think that's the thing that we see about Clean Slate. We have unlikely bedfellows working together in these states. You have business community, faith communities, conservatives, liberal, people in between, people who don't want to have a label on them that are saying that we believe in second chances. And so the Clean Slate Initiative, I think that is one of the secret sauces about it that makes it special, that around the country we're bringing people together around common sense policies. And people want to work together. I think, with so much division in our political atmosphere today, that it feels good when people will pass a bill that's bipartisan, has bipartisan support. It shows that we can come together on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a big thing we're coming together on in a big way. So let's talk about the TED Talk. How excited were you to hear you've been scheduled or been picked, or how does that feel?
Oh my gosh, Trippy, it was surreal. I didn't let it didn't. I'm gonna be honest. Like when I first found out that I had to do a TED talk because we got an award to support our work, that a TED talk will come with it. And I knew about TED talks, but I didn't know how big of a deal it was. Because sometimes I listen to the TED talk, sometimes I didn't. But it wasn't until I started telling people, and people were like, "Why are you doing a TED talk?" But then it was like, "Wait, you're not doing a TEDx. You're going to Vancouver." And it was when I got to Vancouver and it was like 3,000 people there. And I was sitting at this big convention hall that they turned into like a TED Montecito, like it's just everything TED. And I'm looking over, I can remember clearly, I'm looking out at the water and the mountain, and my husband was with me. And I got so overwhelmed and emotional. I was like, cannot, like, gosh, I was like, who would have thought that a pain point in my life, right, a story that has, that it has brought stigma and shame, this was the moment I felt my pain turning into purpose, right? And when I was about to get on the stage, I was really nervous. I was practicing. And let me just tell you, we had to do some pre TED Talks, like to get in the flow, with our own, like a little audience. And they had so much faith in me. They was like, Sheena, we'll have you close it. and I bombed it, Trippy. I bombed it. I was
Oh,
nervous. I was so bad. And when I realized at that moment, I said, I need to talk. I need to tell my story the way I tell my story. So we revamped it. And so the day that I went to tell my TED story, I'm behind stage, and they start doing a countdown. They're like, okay, three, two. I was like, wait, you didn't tell me it was a count. Three, two, one. And they pushed me on stage. And it was just like, I don't know. It was like the spirit took me. And I just remember just giving it my all and standing ovation and clapping. I closed out the TED Talk. And it was a surreal moment, but it was even more surreal when it got published online. I think got almost 2 million views that I started, people flooded in saying how my story was their story, or they never knew it was like this in America, and how can they support? So I believe it changed some of the help with the narrative change about who has a record. And I think people could relate because I was a mom in the early 2000s who was trying to get myself together after two back-to-back hurricanes. You remember those two back-to-back hurricanes that
yeah,
came when
yeah.
one spun around yeah,
I,
and it was during that time. And we've all, I think, most people been there where they maybe wrote a check and hoped that it didn't get cashed until the next day, but it was just my luck that it got returned, and they decided to prosecute.
well, it's so unfair that they didn't just decide to call you and let you make good on it. But I mean, that's just here nor there. I'm not going to get in the weeds on that topic because it
Yes.
happens all the time. But the
They
funny
call
thing
me now
is
though. They call me now, Trippy. My bank look a little different now. So they call me now.
well, you're Dr. Sheena Meade now, 1 million views. I probably am responsible for at least 25 of them because I've watched that. I've watched that over and over again. I couldn't believe you just told me you bombed on the first one because it's just you're on this one that I watch. It's like you're just flawless. You just do it.
Yeah.
You
It
just
was the
float.
practice one. It was the practice one. So I had to get that out of my system. The practice one I was bombing on, but sometimes you got to talk to yourself and give your own pep talk and lean into your flaws, and okay to get that feedback. But I'm glad that you're watching, that you get my views up. So I'm gonna see some more videos to
Well,
help my views go
I
up.
watched it twice already before this interview. That's how I do $87.26. I think was the check amount. I watched it twice this morning. So that's two more views right there. You're gonna hit 1 million soon. If you're not, you're there.
No, I'm already at 1 million. I should be
Yeah.
at 2 million soon.
Oh, you're gonna. There you go. I didn't look at the views, but I was watching it this morning twice. But it's funny to me. The whole TED Talk thing is fun because I met a lady one time years ago. I literally was working overnights out on iDrive, and she said, "Let's meet at the Ale House on Kirkman." And she was doing a TEDx at a school, and we were really figuring it out. I think it fell through for her, so I didn't get to do it. That's always been my goal, but I know I'll never do a TED Talk. But I said, you know what? I'm going to create my own talks. I created Trip Talks, which is teaching reality, integrity, and a
Wow.
passion for progress. And I'm literally working on my first. And so, because that story you tell, I realize I can't tell that story. So, and I watch other people on TED Talks. So that is such a high moment in life. I have Dr. Temple Grandin. I don't know if you know who she is. She's an autistic scientist, and she recently got a call. They're
Mm.
going to put her picture in the Smithsonian, her portrait in the
Oh
Smithsonian.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's like the same thing to me. That's like the same high watermark. You've got a TED
Hmm.
Talk. You've got your portrait, and these are some really amazing accomplishments. And I just
Yeah.
think that's so. Let me get back to my notes because I had another question I really wanted to cover. So, so how did the experience change? So, how did the Clean Slate experience change your vision of basically everything in America? When you meet lawmakers, when you get with
Hmm.
them, and you say,
Hmm.
"Look, there's this problem." We are really creating an underclass just by this simple step. And by taking away this simple step, we're really leveling the playing field in a lot of ways. How do lawmakers receive that? They're like, oh yeah, the prisons are full with innocent people. How do they?
Yeah, it's just taking time with the legislators, educating them on what the problem is. And I would tell you, I have never walked the halls of Congress and been into a member of Congress room. Sorry, my husband's on a call. He's on the podcast. I've never, sorry, I've never walked into a member's office and left, and they was not compelled to touch. Now, did they make the right call? Maybe not because of partisan politics or whatever, but someone was able to relate. Not one person said they was not able to relate to what I talked about after sitting them. And usually when I tell my story, because they think that I'm just coming in as a representative, and then I hit them with my story, and then they'll reflect and say, I had my college buddy, he was going to school to be a doctor. He had one bad night drinking and got arrested, and his life would have been different, but his daddy came and got him. or his daddy was a judge, and I think they start seeing some contrast around who's able to get the record cleared. But again, it's been common sense. I've never had anybody who said that they did not believe in people getting their record cleared. Now, there has been conversation around waiting times and maybe certain offenses, but even, law enforcement, have said that they believe that this contributes to not recidivating. So not people going back into the system. And so you have to take time to move hearts and minds and educate people on the issue. A lot of times people do not know that it's one in three people. They're shocked by that number. They challenge me on the data. The data's real. There's one in three. And usually when I'm in a room, I tell people the data don't lie. You don't have to raise your hand now, but most of you all, I'm one and one, two, somebody else is here. So yeah, so I don't get pushback. We have not had no like organized opposition about it. And usually people who say little slide things they're not aware about what's happening in the country when it comes to our criminal injustice system.
Right. And when you talk about recidivism, that is the petri dish of recidivism. If you cannot ever get out of the rut you're in, the only thing you're going to do is get further in the rut. It's that simple. No one wants to work for $11 an hour their whole life. Sooner or later, they're going to reach out somehow, some way. And if it's breaking the law to feel like they can get ahead that way, they're going to do it. So if you take away that obstacle,
Yeah.
I even was reading from you, sometimes you can't even get admitted into colleges with a
Yeah. Well, it may not even be just a felony. It could be a misdemeanor. I mean, you may have to pull up records. What I hear people say, you've heard this term, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And the way I've been able to kind of like push back on some folks are like, well, they could just pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I was like, well, you got over 90% of employers asking for, doing background checks, and 90% of, landlords, and 74% of the colleges and universities. How are they able to pull themselves up if they're being blocked?
Right. And like you said, I mean, so your thing was bouncing a check. You can't even get a job without negotiating with 30 employers. So you're literally going 4, 5, 6 weeks without a paycheck. What are you going to do next? You're going to bounce another check. You've got a child at home that's got to eat. Why not just take that obstacle away? And you're getting it done. Like you said, you're getting it done state by state. You're going to get to 25 states in 5 years. And hopefully we'll get to all 50 states in the next, hopefully less than 10 years. And that would be really something special because that would level the playing field.
Yeah, I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen. This is the thing. We have states that's moving on legislation with us or without us. We have states that are saying, like, this is common sense. We think this is a workforce issue. This is an economic mobility issue. It's not always seen as a criminal justice issue in different states. I think when they passed in Oklahoma, they saw that there's a business case, like, we have to get people back to work. In Utah, is a big opioid crisis there. And when people were dealing with their sickness, they may have made a census, right? And now when they're clean and healthy, they're trying to get back into the workforce, and they couldn't because of that. And so they saw that as a need to get people back to work. So there's other approaches, and it's not just a criminal justice issue. This issue intersects with anything. Like, you give me a topic, I can tell you how it connects to it. And so I mean, we even got Hawaii reaching out. Hawaii is doing something right now, trying to get folks back to work and passing Clean Slate. At one of our conferences, I had someone from Alaska fly in. So I would just say too, I just left London, meet with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice, who want to talk to me about Clean Slate, of how we've been able to combat the pushback around narrative and being soft on crime, or not being, or hard on crime. And in London, they work around fair checks. I just recently got an email from South Africa. I had a lady I met in London that was from Australia, wanted to know when I'm coming that way. I think it's picking up internationally around how, because people records not, have been a barrier. And I think also other countries have followed suit from some of our practices that they're now trying to retract.
Yeah, and just sharing best practices, and worst practices, really. But now the people that are coming to you are obviously saying, let's share these best practices. Let's understand exactly what you're reaching out to accomplish and accomplishing. And when you think about it on an international level, it's the same thing. Like you said, it's not just crime. It intersects every way of life, that you just make this simple mistake. You said Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii. When you're a young person in Hawaii, there's lots of trouble waiting for you. I mean, I could never surf when I hung out with a lot of surfer dudes.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun. But I can tell you, I was this close to having that same problem with. I seem to slip past the goalie up until I got older, and now I don't slip past the goalie no more.
Yeah.
But I understand Hawaii needs it just as any other state. There's a lot of young people. We never talked about it like you and I, but I knew a lot of young people that were in trouble
Mm-hmm.
before, and it seemed like all they could really do is get jobs washing dishes. And it's just not fair that you make one simple mistake that hurts nobody. You've got no blood on your hands. All you've done is made a simple mistake, and you're just done for life. Basically, you just got this big letter on your head.
Mm-hmm.
There was once a movement that said "axe the box" or something, where you couldn't ask if you've ever had a felony
Yeah,
conviction.
ban the box. But it's not just felony convictions, and that's why I want your audience and your listeners to understand. When I say there's 70 to 100 million people in our country with a arrest or conviction, I'm talking about people who's never been incarcerated too. There's millions of people who've never seen a jail who have an arrest or, a non-conviction on the record, that their record's still holding them back, that it comes up in conversation or have to be disclosed. And also I'm talking about people who don't always have it's a hard conversation, but there are folks who have what we don't call simple and so low level who are still deserving of a second chance. It's something they might have had years ago to have a lot of context to it. And I believe that people are redeemable. And so there's a lot of work to do to educate people, to change the narrative and also educate people. Because again, I'll give you a story. I'm a part of both of the governors association, and I was sitting at this meeting with some governors, and I was telling them my story, and I was telling some data, and the one governor leaned in. He's no longer governor. He retired out of one of these states. And I got nervous because he kind of sat there and paused and gave me this look, Skip. And he interrupted me and he said, Sheena, do you know where I was at? No, he said, do you know where I was at before I was governor or something like that? Or before he was a sheriff. Before he was a sheriff or something like that. I said, where? I got nervous because he started talking about his cop story. He says, I was behind the cop car. He talked about as a juvenile how he got in trouble and then how he got a second chance. And so I'm like, you're one of the 70 to 100 million. And so then another governor comes sits down with us and he goes, hey, come listen to Sheena's story. And the guy sits there, he looks over at his wife, and his wife gives him this look, because I could tell the wife look. She was like, don't open your mouth. I know the wife, don't open your mouth look. But he did. He was like, wait a minute. That data doesn't sound right. I was like, no, really, in your state, one out of four people have a record. And he ended up disclosing to me that he had an arrest, but he looked at it as the other end. He was like, well, it was an arrest. I didn't go to jail. And I was like, these are the people we're still talking about, you know? And you just had the privilege of not having to deal with maybe some of the barriers. But there's over 44,000 collateral consequences that people with arrests and convictions deal with facing. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
we gotta let people know it's not just about former incarcerated people with felonies. There's a plethora of folks with arrests and convictions, millions.
And your biggest role is education, bringing that to everybody's attention, and that's what you do every day. Like, what's your schedule like? Where are you traveling to next?
I'm going back to Chicago to go speak, and then I'll be in DC, and then like I feel like right now I'm Batman in Gotham City. If you was following my location, I'm just going everywhere across the country right now. I'm gonna slow it down in a little bit, but I'm willing to go anywhere to talk to anybody about this issue because it's so important. And I think that your podcast is called Political No Brainer, and you would think a no-brainer about politics is talking to everybody about an issue that you care about if you want to move it, right? That's a political no-brainer. When people say, Sheena, how have y'all been successful? Well, we talk to everybody because everybody's impacted. I recently got to speak at keynote at the Libertarian Convention last year. No, this year, a few months ago, gosh. And it was so well received that, one of the libertarian conferences for one of the states want to now endorse it as their policy agenda. And so, I believe that we have to be able to talk to folks. It's a political no-brainer to make sure that your issue and that your voice is heard amongst all parties and people.
I totally agree. One of the things I always mention, and this goes off the beaten path of the whole getting a second chance, but one of the things I believe is we should be offering our kids rather than just a student loan to go to college, we should also be offering an option of a business loan to start a small business they believe in. And it should just be one or the other. And yeah, there should be some education. You have to pass some courses before you get that money to understand what's involved. And that would take away some of the whole. If you were in a position, I know a lot of really smart young people that could start a really good small business. And the only thing that's holding them back is funding and a little bit of education on how to make it work and how to not think I just made 10 grand when in fact they only been paid 10 grand and they only made $1,000. But the fact of the matter is, those are part of my second. That's something I really believe in, is just enabling young people to succeed, not just holding them back, not just holding them accountable for something they did at a young age and making it their biggest mistake in their lifetime, when in fact it wasn't really that big a mistake. And so I love what you do. I remember I talked to Roger at Legalese. It's sort of a business that helps you navigate the whole. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, I had him on the podcast. Yeah, and it was great because it helps you navigate all that legal jargon that you have to go through in some states. And I was like, this is really great. And I even told him, I said, I hope someday I get to interview Sheena Meade. And he said, I know her. We were talking about you for a little bit on it. And I was like, and then I said, oh, wow, she just responded. She's actually going to do the interview. I was like, woohoo. I've told like 100 people.
Yeah, of course. So we gotta do something. We gotta do something in the future and together since we're neighbors. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely, we do. We gotta. I want to. Yeah, we gotta do. Well, we'll just get together someday because it's literally. Like, I actually ride my bike out to Winter Garden because you leave my development. The bike trail is right there, and I ride all the way to Winter Garden on the bike trail. So we're not far at all.
Yeah,
we're not far at all. So that'll really be fun. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. I know you've got a lot to do. But if you want to finish up like your website or how any
Yeah, folks still like find us at the cleanslateinitiative.org. It's actually cleanslateinitiative.org online. Check us out. We have a lot of resources, toolkits. You can look up your state to see if your state has already passed Clean Slate and connect you to see what is going to implementation. For people out there who, might have had a blemish record, your record may be clear in one of the states. There's some people who don't even know that their record's clear. You can follow me on Instagram at I am Sheena Meade. Please follow me. I respond. I will write back to you in the DMs. And I would just tell folks to remember that we've all have asked for a second chance, one time or another, whether it was from our kids, our parents, a loved one, a teacher, and just make sure that you're paying forward that grace for other people. And I appreciate you having me on here today.
I appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with Dr. Sheena Meade, Chief Executive Officer of the Second Chance Initiative. And I am really happy to have gotten a chance to talk to you. I'm really excited to blame together. Yeah. And like you said, we'll have to get together. I've got your email. I've got your phone number. And we'll get together. Yeah. And you got my number.
Yeah. So and I'll email you this other video. So if you like looking at the video, I got something else as more update that you can see what we're doing. So I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please. That would be great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sheena Meade. You've been awesome. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right, bye.